Right off the bat, this is one of my favorite games that has been released in years. I'm not sure why it took me doing an early impressions video of another Yacht Club game for me to realize I hadn't done a video for Shovel Knight. So here we are. Shovel Knight, I believe, is best described as a modern spin on Mega Man style game, but with more of a Castlevania style equipment system, though not the Metroidvania style exploration except in very limited doses. You start out at first as the titular Shovel Knight, and you're trying to defeat all of the members of the Order of No Quarter. Unlike Mega Man, the stage order is semi-linear, where you're moving along a map and can only select connecting stages. You also don't earn a new weapon from each boss by default, however each stage tends to have a vendor hidden in them that will let you buy a new secondary item. You're also not going to be following a weakness chart. Instead, you actually need to learn the bosses and dodge their attacks rather than exploit their weakness to beat them. But the actual stage fights, as you'll see in this video, are very similar to the way they were structured in Mega Man, which is the reason why this brings Mega Man to mind for me. The bosses are all super unique and fit the theme of their stages, which is what gives the game heavy Mega Man vibes. Your primary weapon is a shovel, and if you're like me, it's going to also be the main one you use. The relics, while super useful, seem relegated to mostly being for stage exploration and helping you make it through damaging attacks unscathed. So there's a bunch of ways you can work them in, and you can actually use them as your main means of attacks, and there's occasions where they are actually useful to use as the primary weapon. But you don't have to, and it's not like Mega Man where there's a direct damage loss for sticking primarily with your shovel. Though you can also buy upgrades for the shovel, and different armors that do affect your basic attacks. For example, my favorite armor makes it so that every third bounce you basically do a charge slash at the end of the bounce. You can slash, and probably my used attack is bouncing off of the enemies. I actually really love the bounce attack. Some bosses will actively defend against it. For example, there's one fellow that holds a shovel above his head, and if you bounce too many times in a row, he'll just smack you. But there are others that kind of become a mini game of dexterity that if you're able to keep aiming well, you can bounce them to death without them really being able to respond. Like, you can just follow them along and keep them cornered, and it's really satisfying when you manage to completely destroy a harder enemy without ever touching the ground. Another feature that differentiates Shovel Knight from Mega Man is that there's a death penalty. I generally hate death penalties in games, but to be honest, it's so easy to farm materials and resources that the penalty doesn't really seem to bother me that much. It's also relatively small. It seems to be a set percentage, so the penalty gets smaller and smaller the less resources that you have. But it can still be a little irritating. What generally happens is whenever you die, and wherever you die, 3 bags containing some of your gems will drop out if you have enough to fill 3 bags. It can be difficult to recover at times, especially since the bags actually pop out and then float up, so they can kind of get to a position where you really can't get to them, especially if you don't have some of the more useful traversal relics, but you can choose to ignore them too if recovering them is too much of a pain. So if you drop them somewhere that you're having trouble with, your best bet's just to ignore them and focus on getting through the stage. Like I said, if you really need gold for something, there are probably going to be easier stages for you to go back and farm. It'll just take you a minute. Realistically, gold is not a super limiting resource in this. And if you find yourself needing it, you can just go back to an earlier level, repeat it a couple times, and get what you need. Combat is extremely fun in Shovel Knight, as it should be since the game would be absolutely terrible otherwise. But the thing is, it is smooth. It works well, the controls are great, and when you die, the vast majority of the time you feel like it is firmly your fault. You don't find yourself cursing at the game. Well, you might, but you pretty quickly admit that it wasn't the game but you that messed up. The difficulty really isn't bad either. Overall, Shovel Knight is a really well-balanced, well-tuned experience that's a massive pleasure to play. It's not super easy, it's not super hard, it's fair, and it's fun. And all this is without even mentioning the story and the music. As usual, I'm skipping spoilers, so don't worry about that. The story is probably the best I've seen out of this style game. It seems like it should be silly, and at times it is. Campy, corny humor can be found in Shovel Knight, but at its core, it's a tragedy about a knight trying to save their partner and fighting against everybody saying their partner is dead. And I do mean partner, like fighting partner. And I say there because you can actually swap the genders for basically every character in the game, and you can actually set it to as a randomizer. It's well told and it's built up in phases so that by the time you hit the climax at the end of the game, you are heavily invested. And the music, this is some of the best chiptunes in the modern era. Jake Kaufman, whom apparently collaborated with Manami Matsume, I think that's how you say that name, has crafted a fantastic soundtrack. If you're old enough that retro games weren't always retro, you'll feel right at home listening to it. If you're young enough that even my teenage years are retro to you, this will still sound great if you have even a passing enjoyment of electronic music. My absolute favorite is the way Treasure Knight stage theme is remixed into the boss theme. This is one of the few times in gaming where I deliberately died to get to hear a piece of music over again. The way the laid back and gentle tone of the stage has its beat ramped up and scale shifted to boost the intensity was gorgeous. It's so cool I'm going to actually take a second and let you hear it. Overall, I absolutely adore Shovel Knight, and even at this point I would say it's a 10 out of 10 and highly recommend it if you love retro-style scrolling action games at all. But we're not even halfway done with the game. When it first came out, all that we got was the main campaign of Shovel Knight. Then the first update, Plague of Shadows, came out where you get an entirely new campaign for Plague Knight. Instead of your shovel, you now have access to bombs, which you can customize to fit your own playstyle similar to the upgrades you can get for Shovel Knight, as well as his own armor upgrades, etc. Basically, everything that made Shovel of Hope, which is the original campaign's title, cool, but so different you do not feel like you're just playing a reskinned campaign. You're not just grabbing a different character and playing through the exact same thing over with some weird things where the story's different. It's its own experience. Even the boss fights feel different. Even your movement and the stage traversal is different. You have a double jump, but can charge up your bomb so you explode and launch yourself through the air. Everything is different. Then it happened again, and they released Specter of Torment, where you get to play as Specter Knight. This one is a prequel, and you get to see the formation of the Order of No Quarter, as well as play as a boss that, while it was easy to beat in Shovel of Hope, actually feels really powerful to play as. Again, all new weapons and combat systems, new collectibles, new everything, fully revamped a second time. But they still weren't finished because King of Cards came out, and you get to do the campaign again as King Knight. This time it's much more humorous, but the main focus is getting through the stages to do card battles and become the King of Joustus. Which can be somewhat brutal because while you get to take a card from your opponent when you win, they actually get to do the same to you. Though, if you're having trouble with the card game, you can spend some gems to buy cheats for this mode. I guess they didn't want to block people off from finishing the story if they didn't do well with the card game, which is appreciated. All this without even mentioning Showdown, which I didn't even realize was in the game for a long time. It's a secondary brawler party game with a story mode where you can play as even more characters than the ones in the campaign and give some extra story tidbits. Honestly, this is my least favorite of all the games that come with this, but it's not really necessary to enjoy the main body of Shovel Knight, and it was originally designed as a little bit more of a sort of party game. So it feels very different from the main game of Shovel Knight. I'm not really going to dive into it here. It's attached to Treasure Trove, so you get it free if you buy Treasure Trove, but whatever, you may enjoy it, and if you really want more story, there you go. By the way, the best way to play through the games is play through them in the order that they were released. So Shovel Knight, Plague Knight, Spectre, and then King. And even though one of them's a prequel, it does have stuff in it that would reveal details from the previous one, so it's probably best played in order. And a lot of the jokes are references to things that happened in earlier campaigns. So that should be the order you go through the game in. The thing is, I would have been happy paying money for each of the individual games. Shovel Knight, not on sale, which goes on sale pretty often, is about $40, seemingly no matter which platform you get it on, although it seems like on Xbox One you can get a physical copy really cheap right now for some reason. But That's still only about $10 per campaign without including Showdown. To me, this is an incredible value for what you get. Even with everything you get, back when it was just Shovel of Hope, it was already one of my favorite games. It was also already worth the full price, in my opinion. There's plenty to do, there's plenty of achievements, there's plenty of things to go back and grab. You're going to put a little bit of time into it. It's not a super long game, so you're not going to dump like hundreds of hours into it, but you'll get your money's worth out of it. So, everything that has been added over time since it was originally released just sweetened the pot. So, roughly at $10 per campaign, Shovel Knight is easily a 10 out of 10, and everyone that enjoys this style game needs to try it at least once. And that's all I have to say for this. And remember, if I can beat it, so can you.